This video is going to feature some tactics for the map Mines in the game World of Tanks, and primarily the two tactics which are outlaid here on Strat Sketch. First of all, there's going to be on the east side, you have a flanking maneuver where you start at the base and you head north, and there's two hills that have bush coverage that allow you to fire against enemy tanks. The other one is if you spawn on the west side and it's probably an encounter battle, it'll show you how to advance through the river, spotting enemy tanks at the enemy base and spotting them as they head to battle and getting around behind their rear flank. For the northern team, I have one tactic that I like to use, and I use this with any tank except for SPGs, and that is to come down the west side, spot as many tanks as I can as they're headed to battle, go all the way down to the south on the red line, shoot at enemy tanks that are up on the hill, and then come around and clean up the tank destroyers that are hiding in the backfield. This tank is the SU-101. This is a Russian Tier 8 tank destroyer, and the map is Mines. I'm going to go to my normal flanking position. It's going to be a little bit different. This is a rear-mounted turret, so there's two positions to flank from. One has a bunch of bushes. I'm not going to go to that one. Go to the one behind it, which is a little bit higher up, and it's a little bit more appropriate for a rear turreted tank. It does mean that my allies are going to have to spot for me. So this position is a little bit higher up. For the most part, you're not going to, well, I guess I did get spotted, but it's more difficult to be spotted from the back position. You can fire through. And I'm going to have some nice shots. You're going to see some good shooting positions. Right there's one. You can see I can hit that Super Conqueror, and I probably won't get spotted. Unfortunately, I missed. Did 507 damage. Ouch. Now, there is a house in the way, so you do have to worry about that rooftop. And people are going to assume that you're at the bush, so if you play further back, it should be easier. Did 414 damage on the Rom Borsig. The T-28 prototype is going to be afraid to come out. So you can see there's two positions that you can snipe at. You do have to be careful. If you don't control the hill, the enemy can snipe at you from up on the hill. I missed a shot on a tank out there. And if you want, you can go forward and you can snipe at the tanks at the enemy base that are up on that cliff. See, now that T-28 is taking random shots at the bushes, and he's not hitting anything. Now, the mistake I made is I didn't realize that my ally, which was an ISM, had died. So I no longer had enough support on my flank. I've done 1,800 damage so far. If you need to spot for yourself, you're going to have to go into the bushes. And you'll notice it looks like the roof of the house has already been destroyed. If you have a tank with a very good engine, you can go to the right. There's bushes, and then there's a rock on the right of the bushes. If you have a powerful engine, you can go higher up and hide behind that rock, and you can go shoot over that house. But this type of tank won't be able to do it. A KV-5 would be able to. So I'm up to 2,000 damage. 2,000 damage in a tier 10 game. That's really good for this tank.
Unfortunately, this is the point where I realized that I don't have any support. So it was too little too late, and I was spotted. This tank is a T-54 lightweight. This is a Russian Tier 9 light tank, and the map is mines. Me and a large portion of my team, 4 or 5 allied tanks, we're going to head to the south, and we're going to get behind the enemy, and we're going to start shooting at them from the rear. Now, you notice that there's a bush here. This is a spot where you can go and you can park and turn on your binocs and spot enemy tanks, but the problem is you can't reach all the way down to the red line, so you might miss some tanks that are trying to come across. So what I do is I advance to the next section, try to stay close to these bushes so I can spot anyone that's coming across, and come out to here. You can see that I didn't spot anybody, so I kept on going. I'm going all the way to the red line, and I'm advancing south. You see there's 5 allied tanks behind me. I know from playing this game that the best thing to do is to go all the way to the red line, or to go to this location right over here where this bush is, because you can hide in this bush and you can shoot at those tanks over there without being spotted. You can double bush. Now, I do have a problem, which is that there is a T-26E4 tank that's right there, but I also have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 allied tanks over here up in these hills to back me up. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep that T-26E4 spotted, but I'm going to let my allies do as much damage to him as possible. Keep myself safe and protected. So you can see I have shots on the hill. Nobody went actually up into the hill. You'll notice that my allies are approaching my area, if you look on the mini-map. This enemy tank is not even turning around because I'm not spotted. He doesn't really know where I'm here. His ally doesn't know that we're here. He did too little too late. So we can look and see what my allies are doing. They're obviously doing some damage to the T-26E4. They are at the red line, which is the proper position to play on this map. Where this T-44 is not really that great of a position, but he does have shots from there, but it's not the ideal position, especially if you're by yourself. A lot of those tanks are at the edge of my rendering range. No, I'm sorry, not rendering range, but spotting distance. So you can see I got spotted. The enemy is starting to do something. They see that something is going on. They are coming down, but they are going to take damage if they stay in that position. You can see that that tank just took 533 damage. You do want to do this maneuver as quickly as you can in the game, because what will happen is that as time passes, there will be less and less enemy tanks trying to climb the hill. And the fewer that there are tanks there, the less targets you're going to have to shoot at. Now, because we know that there are enemy tanks literally on the other side of this rock, the T-28 prototype and another tank, Progetto, I'm going to go and spot them at some point for my team. So it looks like one of those tanks was taken out, and the T-28 prototype is running away. The score is 8-0. I only did 1,200 damage and 1,000 spotting damage, but we cleaned up. If you look, the western side of the map is completely controlled by allies. There's no enemy tanks on the western side of the map. It was because of our flanking maneuver. On the eastern side of the map is where all the enemy tanks are safe. But we could just as easily come up with a maneuver to clean up on that side of the map. Maybe we'll do that in a future video. Just got 500 spotting damage on that T-28 prototype. There is an SPG in the game, so we will need to go spot him also. even though I know that I'm not going to penetrate his armor, but I still take the shot. And the reason why is, number one, you do want to practice. Number two, sometimes it actually does penetrate. And number three, you really want to keep the enemy on his toes. You don't want him to think that he controls the game. You want bullets pointing at him, even if they're ricocheting. We're obviously going to win this game. But keep them on their toes. Keep shooting at those cupolas. Keep shooting at those tracks. It's part of the way to becoming a better player. Scores 10-0. Now, at this point in the game, if I live or if I die, we're probably going to win this game. So I don't care if they do any damage to me. I'm not worried about that. I'm just going to get my final damage in before these tanks are taken out of the game. So you can see I chose the wrong tank, and the tank that I chose had more hit points, but it died first. So my gun was not aimed at the proper tank, and I missed a shot, which would have been a kill shot. Score is 12-1. We're easily going to win this game. Now, even though it is the end of the game, I am now low on hit points. I could potentially be shot as a one-shot, so I'm using a different tactic. I am going to stall this Progetto, get him to have his attention on me, and wait for my allies to get around him or wait for him to expose himself. So I'm not going to fire my gun unless I got a clear shot. What I'm going to do is just annoy him and play with him. You can see that my ally took a shot and he fired. It's just a baiting technique. Okay, so that's 15-1. I did 1,457 damage, 1,700 spotting damage, and I got 1 kill. This tank is Light Vic. This is a British Tier 2 light tank, and the map is Mines. So I like to play the Tier 2 tanks, and the reason why is because sometimes they get a 5x bonus. It allows me to test out different tactics and strategies, and I like to play with the autoloaders. And I like to play with the tank destroyers in the lower tiers. And I do the lower tier tanks. Usually my first games of the day, I play a couple Tier 2 games just to see how the internet connection is. When I was playing from South America, it was very important because the connection would go down all the time. So I needed to know if I had a good connection or not before I started using the personal reserves. So on this day, we got a good connection. I was able to make it to the south. The game, believe it or not, is very competitive at Tier 2. It's not easy. You know, many years ago, maybe it was easy to play a Tier 2 game, but now it's very, very competitive. These people are very good. There's a lot of players, like some of the top players play 20,000 battles Tier 2 only. So you'll notice that I wasn't able to penetrate that tank. But it doesn't mean that you don't fire, because by shooting at him and him having incoming fire, it did cause him to reverse, which means that he's not as much of a threat to my allies. And it allows you to test different theories, like if it says that it's red, does it ever penetrate? Sometimes it does. Sometimes you get a lucky shot in, sometimes you don't. And you also learn a lot about armor. If you play Tier 2 with a well-armored tank, you can have really good games. There's definitely something to say about having strong armor, even in the higher tiers. There's a lot of tanks in the game, and by playing Tier 2, it helps you gauge knowing the difference between all these different tanks. For example, this M14/41 is a well-armored tank, but it doesn't look like it. And this other tank right over here is not a well-armored tank. So one of the reasons why I play Tier 2 is to help me decide the armor values of the tanks that I'm shooting against. You notice that I'm moving back and forth, and that is because I don't want him to hit me. I want to increase the chance that he's missing. And then I stop my tank to allow it to aim in a little bit more when I'm about ready to fire. I don't do it when it's reloaded. I do it a second before I'm fully reloaded, so that once I'm reloaded, I'm ready to fire. Now you'll notice that the first tank, which was the M14, was well armored, and the indicator said that I would not penetrate. And when I switched it to this other tank, it says that it should be easy to penetrate. So that's an example of how I'm testing the armor penetration. That you can see I will not be able to penetrate that tank. If I fire 20 shots, it might penetrate one. So now you'll see that there's an enemy tank, which is a medium one, that's a potential threat to me. And I have to gauge how am I going to deal with him. So I'm coming up with a plan. I want him to come out more. One of his allies is shooting at me, which means I have to take action immediately. I cannot wait. You'll notice that when I went over that little hill, it threw my gun high up in the air, which means that I took the wrong path. I should have taken a path which is a little bit more to the left, where my tank would be more level, so I had the appropriate gun elevation. And they took me out of the game. This tank is a WZ-131. This is a Chinese Tier 7 light tank. The map is Mines. I'm going to show you a technique that I use in these games. What we're going to do is first we're going to spot enemy tanks that are heading into the game. Because people aren't ready for this yet, we don't usually do a lot of damage, but if our allies are anticipating and set up better, you can see I'm taking shots. We are going to get some damage on these tanks. So what we're going to do is we're going to flank these guys. Me, the Centurion, the T-43, everyone that's on the western side of the map, we're going to push forward. I'm going to go to the next set of bushes. You notice that the Su-122 44 was spotted. We're going to keep those TDs in the backfield spotted. Tanks like that. The SPGs will fire at them. The Centurion will fire at him. The T-43, you can see that the Waffenträger was spotted. So after we take those tanks out of the game, the Chiri was spotted, the Su-122 was killed, so he's already out of the game. After these tanks are out of the game, we're going to continue to advance forward. We're going to spot their SPGs and kill them. Took a 617 hit on that Waffenträger. And then we're going to get behind the enemy, and we're going to shoot at the enemy from behind, hopefully from a position where they can't see us. So the Lorraine got spotted on that shot. I'm not sure who spotted him. Must have been one of my allies. As you can see, I'm moving to a closer position. He's out of the game. We've got the SPIC. We got to spot that Waffenträger. This tank is a great tank. I love playing this tank. It's a Tier 7 WZ-131 Chinese tank. So if you like playing light tanks, I do recommend these tanks. So I'm watching the minimap to try and gauge when it's safe to advance, to get close to these tanks so that we can start spotting them. For example, you're going to see that there's a Scorpion G. Oh, look at that. He's out in the open. And it's pretty safe for me to be in this position. I'm going to be watching his gun. You can see the Centurion and the T-43 are starting to make their advance north. You want to stay in the water. When you're in the water, you're at a very low point in the field, so it's going to be difficult for the enemy to hit you on the low ground. So I found some bushes where I can advance. If that Scorpion G gets spotted, he's going to be an easy target for me to fire at. So the Waffenträger is now out of the game. There's that Scorpion. He's quite far away. It will be very difficult for him to spot me, even if I'm firing my gun because of the distance. Scores 9-2. We're cleaning up on these guys. Now, even though he's unspotted, I'm still going to take shots at him. You can see that the SPIC is going to be shooting at the rear flank. You want to see where that SPIC is. He is right over there. He has shots on any tank that is in the middle of the hill. The T-43 is taking up a sniping position where the enemy was. I also have clear shots on the hill. Score is 12-4. I did 1,000 damage. Got 1 kill. Now we got 2 enemy tanks in the game. Telling my team that I think they did a good job. Now I'm just going to run in. I got mostly full health. I don't care if they shoot at me. Just try to do as much damage as I can. And that's the game. I did 1,400 damage, 840 spotting damage. And I've done this maneuver many times, and it's definitely an effective maneuver. This tank is the RU-251. This is a German Tier 9 light tank. The map is mines. I'm going to get 2,000 spot damage. Now, as you can see from this position, you can spot a lot of enemy tanks as they leave their spawn. And this is not the only position that you can use. For example, there is a bush right there that you can use to get closer to them. But you're pretty much guaranteed to spot tanks if you go to that position. I only did 187 spotting damage, so my allies didn't really take advantage of it. As you can see, I moved to a closer position, which is the next island. I was able to spot a T-26E5. Plus, I saw a tree fall down next to him. So I know that there is definitely another tank to his right in the A4 area. There's 10 spotted tanks. 1 dead, which brings up to 12. 1 SPG, which brings it up to 13, which means that there's 2 unspotted tanks in the game. I'm waiting for my team to take out that T-26E5, and I was really disappointed at how long it took for them to do so. So now we're down to 1 unspotted tank in the game. It's probably safe for me to move forward and get closer to these tanks. But I'm not going to do so until we've dealt with this tank. That tank needs to be taken out of the game. As long as we can still spot him, remain in this position, and have him taken out of the game, and then move on to the next target. Up to 1,400 spotting damage. See, there's not a lot of shots going in. There is a bat chat. He's going to have to reload from his autoloader. Somebody's shooting and missing, that's for sure. Okay, so it looks like the Scorpion is the last unspotted tank. So now we know where everybody is except for the SPG. And now I know that I could move up to one of these positions. I could move up to here, up to this slope, behind this rock, over there where that bush is. I've got a couple of options now. Okay, so he's finally out of the game. Now I'm not spotting anybody. Okay, there's a Scorpion G that just became spotted. I know it's taking a long time, but it's best to sit and wait. I lost my ally, so the bat chat was taken out of the game by a Pershing. You'll notice that the score was 3-8 or 4-8, so I was worried a little bit about the fact that we were losing, and I wanted to take some action. We spent too much time dealing with those tanks over there, and the P-44 was not in a firing position. I should have turned left sooner. Trying to get away from those enemy tanks. And unfortunately, I was taken out of the game. The score is 6-11. This tank is the VK-100-01P. This is a German Tier 8 heavy tank, and the map is Mines. What I'm going to do is I'm going to try and get on the rear flank of the enemy team. This tank has great armor on it. The gun's not that great. There's really nothing special about the gun. And I'm a mid-tier tank in this game. So my choices are either head onto the island and try to go to the rear flank, or I could head up the hill in the middle. But it doesn't really have great gun depression, and you've got this big cupola up on the top, which is very easy to hit, and it's a strong weak point. So if I go to the hill in the middle, I'm going to take a lot of damage on that cupola, and they're quickly going to take me out of the game. So then the other option is to go where the T-34 is going. But if I head that way, the cupola's on the wrong side. You want the cupola to be on the right side of the gun. If it's on the left side of the gun, it's going to be easy for enemy tanks to hit that cupola. It's a very slow tank, but I decided to head directly south. And I've gone this way with many different tanks. It's definitely, if you can make it all the way to the south where the Chi-Ri is, you can do a lot of damage to enemy tanks. Now I want to keep my gun pointed towards the charioteer, because my stronger armor is where my gun mantlet is. You don't want him to hit the side of the turret. My allies have come part of the way, so they will be able to give me some assistance. We got to take these guys out of the game. A lot of sloppy shots so far. Now this guy, I'm just going to try and ram him if I can. Yeah, he's out of the game. I've got too many snipers backing me up. He never would have gotten anywhere. And the Chi-Ri's not penetrating my armor. So you want to go all the way to the red line as far as you can. The closer you are to the red line, the less you're going to get hit by artillery and other tanks. And it's like I said, that Chi-Ri, he's now in the middle of a crossfire. I'm surprised my allies haven't come down with me. Now, because it took a long time for me to get here, a lot of the enemy tanks are no longer on the hill in the middle. However, you can see me and the Batchat 25T, we're now advancing into the enemy territory. So the enemy won the hill, but they're not winning the game. You know, anyone who says win the hill, win the game doesn't know what they're talking about. It is just not true. We're winning 10-5. We're going to end up with control of the hill by the time the game's over. So I got 1,700 damage, 975 spotting damage, 1,400 blocked by armor. The score is 12-6. There's only 3 enemy tanks left in the game. We know where they all are. I'm going to speed it up a little. And that's the game.